Hi, everybody. Good morning. It seems like we have a good number of attendants now, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on targeting recruitment and retention strategies for youth skills development. This is a webinar that's being run by the Cross-Sectoral Skills for Youth Community of Practice through YouthPower. So welcome, everyone. We have a number of great presentations today and also some time for discussion, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Daniel Pout, and I work with Results for Development, and we are the COP champions for the Cross-Sectoral Skills COP, and so I'll be moderating the debate today and the discussion. I'll start just by going through our agenda and also actually introducing a little bit more about the COP and what we do. And so I'll start then just going through our agenda very quickly. If you have any issues with the sound or anything related to that, let us know and we'll try to remediate that. But you should be able to see and hear me now. And you also should be able to see and hear our participants shortly. Okay, so welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I will start by going through our agenda very quickly. I'll start by doing a quick introduction, which is what I'm doing right now. I'll also go over a little bit some of the activities that our COP does, as well as what we plan to do in the future for those interested. I will then go through and guide you through our presentations. We'll start with Noor Shamut from JPAL, who's going to provide a researcher's perspective to our topic today. And we'll follow on with 3 presentations from additional implementers. So we have Mohammed El-Kamo from Al-Shanak Yabaladi in Egypt. We have Hillary Proctor from Making Sense International. And finally, we have Ashley Berry from Education for Employment. As you know, our webinar today is focused on targeting recruitment and retention challenges faced by skills-based programs targeting youth. And so they will be providing a number of different examples of how their programs have tried to mediate these challenges. And Noor will be providing a little bit of a researcher's perspective on what the evidence has to say about these issues and how implementers have tried to address them. For each presentation will take about 5 to 10 minutes. And from then on, we'll take some questions for each presenter. And we'll finally also have a session for comments, questions at the end with everyone. And finally, some closing thoughts from us at the COP champion headquarters. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll start by first giving a little bit of a COP update. And so again, as I mentioned, this is a webinar hosted by the Cross-Sectoral Skills for Youth community of practice that's hosted under the YouthPower Learning initiative. This COP has 2 goals. The main 2 goals are to facilitate members' exchange of knowledge, experiences, and ideas to build a better understanding of cross-sectoral skills for youth and their impact on positive youth development, and also to contribute to the field by adding learning experiences and events, research, and other outputs to contribute to and add to this field of positive youth development and cross-sectoral skills for youth. We started the COP in December of 2015. I imagine many of you in attendance were probably there at our Learning Network launch for YouthPower. And we've come a long way since then. We've established a Google group in February of 2016, as well as a COP charter. In March of 2016, we launched an RFA for a grants under contract mechanism, which was later awarded in June of 2016 and led to an initiative that's currently going on that's surveying youth in Honduras, Philippines, and Rwanda to understand a little bit more about the mismatches between youth and employers in regards to soft skills and how important they are and what sort of soft skills are necessary for adequate employment for youth. And we've also had a slew of opportunities to share knowledge and resources with each other, both on the Google group where we've posted events, articles, and opportunities. We've had an in-person meeting that R4D hosted alongside with FHI 360 to discuss some of the skills measurement tools that FHI 360 were surveying. And today we have our webinar on targeting and recruitment and retention. And all of this has happened over the course of the last year. And over that course, we've added a number of members. We're now up to 150 members and growing. And so I'll add some more information at the end of this webinar for those who are interested in joining, who may not already be part of this community of practice, what you can do to join and contribute. I also have a couple of exciting and interesting upcoming activities and opportunities to discuss for the community of practice. In the next year, we'll continue contributing and guiding the grants under contract that we have allocated. We also always have the opportunity to contribute and pitch more ideas to fund through the grants under contract mechanism. We'll also be looking for contributions to the youthpower.org website through blog posts and also through our Google group. So we'll have opportunities for COP members to be engaged and promote their work in that way. We'll continue to share events and resources through our Google group. We also have a number of future online and in-person events that we are developing, and those will include potentially webinars, other webinars on skills development for urban youth, also an employability program, deep dive webinar, and a webinar that may focus on skills development for young women. So there's a lot to come here, and so this is just the beginning of webinars and learning events that we'll be developing. We have a technical brief that's soon coming out, and that's a technical brief that's focused on the same topic that we're talking about today. It's focused on targeting recruitment and retention. You may have seen, if you're part of that community of practice, that we've already shared a draft of that for everyone to review and comment on. And we look forward to your comments there. We'll be releasing that later this month at the Learning Network meeting that we'll be holding with YouthPower. And then finally, we have the Global Youth Economic Opportunity Summit coming up later this month, which I know a number of you will be in attendance, and as COP champions will also be there, both presenting on a number of different topics, but also gathering resources and interesting insights to share with our COP membership. So that's an update of the COP and what we're doing, what we're up to. I'll provide some more update later on how you can join if you're not already part of the COP and how you can contribute. But next, I'd like to go ahead and start with our presentations on our theme today. And again, for those of you who just joined, that theme is targeting recruitment and retention challenges and approaches by skills building programs working with youth. Our first presenter, as I mentioned earlier, today is Noor Shamood, and she's coming to us from JPAL, and she will be presenting a little bit about the research that her team at JPAL has done and the review of the evidence that they've done regarding targeting recruitment and retention and what sort of insights she has from that. So with that, I will just take 1 second to upload her presentation and also open it up for Noor to contribute. So Noor, if you'd like to unmute your microphone. And I will go ahead and upload your presentation. Noor, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are just now able to hear you. If you'd like to activate your camera so everyone can see you as well. And we can go ahead and get started. There you are. Great.
So thanks Thanks, Daniel, for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I actually have a bit more time to talk about all the exciting things I'd like to share about this very important topic, but I guess we have to stick to the 10 minutes you've given us. Please feel free to follow up with any questions at a later time. So I wanted to begin by introducing JPAL more broadly for those who are basically new to JPAL. We are a global network of affiliated researchers who use randomized evaluations to answer policy questions that are basically critical to solving some of the biggest challenges in the fight against poverty. We have three main activities within JPAL: the research side, policy, and capacity building. And so we have a dedicated group to each of these activities. Our headquarters are at MIT's Department of Economics, so we're basically a research center within MIT. But we do have independent regional offices in Africa, Europe, Latin America, North America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. All of these regional offices are hosted by local universities. So one of the sectors at JPAL is the labor market sector, which is the sector that Megan Mahoney, my colleague, a policy manager on the team, and myself work on. Most of our work is done in collaboration with our co-chairs, Professor Marianne Bertrand at the University of Chicago and Professor Bruno Crepon at École Polytechnique and INSEE in Paris. And so we've recently conducted a review of the literature. It's mostly based on ICTs. And the way we've organized it is by looking at the labor demand side, or interventions that target firms, and then the labor supply side, or interventions that target youth, and then looking at how we can match those two, or how we can address barriers on both sides of the labor market. And so given today's theme around youth skills, retention, and targeting, we'll focus mostly on this column in the middle here. So one of the things we wanted to highlight is that in addition, yes?
No. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just getting some messages from folks. If you could speak a little bit louder, there are a few folks that are having a difficult time hearing you.
Better?
Thank you.
I wanted to highlight that one of the things that we look at, so there are barriers beyond skill barriers that we consider as important barriers to think about when designing programs and thinking about interventions that can help youth transition to the labor market. So beyond skills, there's also social barriers, and those barriers relate to social networks and how your social network can help or hinder the opportunities that come your way, or the aspirations and expectations an individual has towards their career. Second, we have geographic barriers. This idea that spatial mismatch can limit youth access to jobs, especially since youth are more likely to be burdened by transportation costs related to job search and related to actually getting to their job on a daily basis. And finally, we have information barriers. And this can be many things. Information can be a barrier when youth have poor information about the return to education. It can be a barrier when they lack the counseling necessary to allow them to present themselves in the labor market, write a proper resume, follow proper interview etiquette, etc. Information can also be related to career and job expectations not being consistent with the reality of the labor market. So not knowing what job opportunities exist and how they can base the decision to apply to jobs or accept certain job offers on facts rather than on their perception. That being said, when we think about targeting and reducing dropout rates in skill training programs, we need to consider which groups of participants are more likely to drop out and what are the determinants of dropout, and how can programs address those issues and weave them into program design. JPAL affiliate Mushfiq Mubarak and co-authors tracked a large fraction of program dropouts in vocational training and entrepreneurial training targeting Malawian youth. And what they wanted to do with the study is basically, by tracking them, they wanted to analyze and examine the determinants and the consequences of high dropout rates and how this can affect the general impacts of these programs and how this can affect certain groups of individuals. And what they found that, in particular for women, participation was more expensive in the sense that in addition to resulting in worse training experiences, they found that women were making decisions in a more constrained environment, and that this can really impact how they can benefit from these programs. A similar study in India also that looked at a subsidized vocational training for women found that some of the key barriers that women face when participating in these programs are related to credit constraints, access, so basically ability to get to the training course, and the availability of inexpensive childcare. So without the lack of, when women lack support for these three things, they were more likely to drop out. So I wanted to talk briefly about two examples from basically interventions that looked at relatively successful entrepreneurship programs in northern Uganda and Nigeria. Both of these programs offered cash grants to the winners of a business plan competition. And both authors in these papers and in similar studies actually identify two key mechanisms that led to these positive impacts. First, they found that when they addressed existing credit constraints, this definitely led to basically a higher likelihood that the program would be a success. But the fact that the cash grants were also tied to winning the business plan competition, this really served as a targeting mechanism that made it possible to identify the individuals who are more likely to be successful and basically interested in running a business. Now, the way this can relate to skill-based training programs is by thinking about the way we design our program and how we can weave targeting mechanism into the program itself. And the thing is that with skill training programs, youth may not always understand or know the benefits of participating in a training program. We have some interesting examples from India and the Dominican Republic that show that when programs that targeted providing information about the return to certain education or training paths were made salient or were made available for youth and to different target groups, this can really lead to an increase in investments in education. But in the case of India, for example, we saw it also had improvements in other aspects, such as nutrition of girls, delayed marriage, childbearing, and their general aspirations and expectations for the future. And so I wanted to end by providing some of the key open questions that have come out of our research or our review of the most recent review of the evidence. First, and very generally, when it comes to retention, it's very important to think about why youth drop out. So what are the barriers that youth face that makes them more likely to drop out from certain programs? And second, which groups of people or are some youth more likely to drop out than others? Third, what components or program features can be weaved into program design to limit dropouts and to relieve those constraints that youth face? Finally, on targeting, very generally, we need to think about how we can target the right people, whether it's an entrepreneurship program or skill-based program or otherwise. We want to think about what makes youth more likely to benefit from certain training programs as opposed to other employment interventions. What is the key barrier here? Is it that they would benefit more from an information intervention or a training program that's just as appropriate? How can we best provide youth with information about the returns and the returns to certain programs and the quality of these various programs? And finally, how can youth employment programs identify and target youth as we've just described?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So when it comes to the main gaps in evidence with regards to this idea of targeting and retention, I've just presented some of these questions, but as you can imagine, these questions can be broken down into many subcategories as well. But I think one of the things that we need to think about generally when it comes to targeting and retention is how can skill-based programs really understand the people they're working with and their target group of youth or otherwise that they're working with, and really understand what are their needs and the barriers that may make skill-based programs available to them. And so thinking about how we can weave in other features of the program and understanding how those can positively basically improve the likelihood that they will be participating until the very end, so not dropping out. In terms of lessons from other sectors, there's actually quite a bit that look at how we can better target and increase the likelihood that people will participate in different programs. For example, one of the programs in health that looks at ways to incentivize and increase the likelihood that children will be immunized. This is based on a study in India, and it looked at different incentive schemes to improve immunization rates among children. So beyond providing access, providing clinics that basically will always be open for when parents actually show up to those vaccination centers. One of the very interesting lessons we've learned is that sometimes providing other material incentives can also make a difference. So in one example, providing staples such as lenses, a bag of lentils every time you come into a vaccination increased the basically show up rate. So the way this program is designed is by looking at the local context and what are the real needs of people on the ground, and this is how they came up with these solutions. And so I think a same lesson could be learned when it comes to designing programs targeting youth employment.
Great, thank you. We also have just a couple of questions from our participants, so I'll give you a couple of those, and then we can move on soon to Mohammed's presentation. From Louis Alexander, we have, what do you see as the top 3 causes of dropout based on the evidence that you have seen so far for skills-based programming? And then from Mike McCabe, he's wondering if you can mention any evidence related to linking participants to peer or group mentoring models as a form of reducing dropout in skills training. So any sort of examples that you might have or evidence related to peer or group mentoring models as a means of retaining participation and reducing that dropout.
Yeah, sure. So I actually, in my presentation, I cited 2 studies that looked at the determinants for dropout rates, and some of those that have been identified are credit constraints, access or transportation, and finally childcare. Now, this can be different in different local contexts, and it really depends on the target group we're working with. So if we're working with youth, those would have different requirements than, for example, women of childbearing age. And so thinking about the target group is important, and the local context as well. So that's in terms of the determinants for dropouts. The second question, can you remind me what the second question is, Daniel, please?
So Mike is just wondering about evidence that you might have seen with a particular approach to retention prevention, that is linking youth to peer groups or mentoring groups that as a means to maintain them in the training program.
Off the top of my head, I need to think about this, but when it comes to peer groups, there's one example I think is very interesting from India that looked at an entrepreneurship program, or a program that basically provided loans and financial literacy programs to women to encourage them to be entrepreneurs. Women who were trained with friends from their community or other women in their social network were more likely to take on the loan and to actually use it and start a business. And so there are some examples of those studies, but to directly answer your question about a mentoring program that links youth to peer groups, I do not have any example off the top of my head, but I'm happy to provide if I could come across any in the future.
Great. Thanks very much, Noor. Let's go ahead and move on to Mohammed's presentation now. I'll go ahead and upload that. And Mohammed, if while I'm loading your presentation, you'd like to unmute your microphone and also start your camera. And we'll be able to have some more questions for Noor later in the webinar, and also we will be happy to share her slides as well.
Yes, thank
Mohammed?
you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much.
There you are. Great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending the webinar. My name is Mohammed Al-Kamil. I'm the Managing Director of Alashanik Baladi. And basically, we are working on empowering young individuals, youth, and young people to eradicate poverty in Egypt. And we are trying to have like economic empowerment models that can be replicated in the MENA region, because in the MENA region we have a lot of unemployment among youth, and we are trying to focus on establishing more stable job opportunities that can help young individuals to eradicate poverty that exists in the region. Basically, in MENA region, we have 100 million individuals that are living in poverty. 25% of them are living in Egypt because of its large population. And the problem of unemployment is is a very tough problem in the MENA region, not only in Egypt. We have about 30% unemployment rate among youth in the MENA region compared to 13% as a global youth unemployment rate. For us, we perceive the problem is because of we have from 4 to 5 individuals that are living in the family, and we have in average 1 individuals only that is generating income. Of course, the income that is generated by this employed individual is not sufficient to cover all the basic needs of the 4 or the 5 family members. And the number of breadwinners is very small because the number of young people that are unemployed is very high. For example, we have 6 million young individuals that are unemployed in Egypt. And according to the International Labour Organization, for example, the MENA region retains the highest youth unemployment rate in the world, which is the main problem behind poverty. If you are also analyzing or trying to figure out why the problem is can be witnessed more in slum areas or poor areas, we can go to families and we don't see only 4 or 5 individuals that are living in one family, but actually it reaches 7 or 8 individuals. And with 1 breadwinners only that is generating income for this family, it creates a vicious circle of poverty because basically they can't access basic social services such as education and health services, and of course they can't have enough monthly spending on their basic needs. So the problem is massive problem in the slum areas and poor areas in Egypt, and as well as in other areas in the MENA region. It's basically the same problem. We are trying to address this problem through 2 main components of our programs. The first component is to improve young people capabilities, which is providing vocational, technical, and interpersonal skills training and coaching programs in order to match the young people capabilities to the labor market requirements and also to the local market requirements, as well as creating stable and sufficient income employment opportunities, because only providing capacity development programs is not sufficient to eradicate poverty, but we need employment opportunities that can generate sufficient income to satisfy this poor family's needs. And we have actually a flexible model. We are not providing one-size-fits-all program for all the young people that are applying for علشانك يا بلدي. We have, of course, an impact process that is focusing on 4 steps: the training, coaching, employment, and the 12-month support after employment. But we are trying to tailor and change our training and coaching programs to address the change in the market demands. Also, we are focusing on the behavioral attributes that are hindering personal growth. This is done through the coaching. And I heard questions about the mentoring and coaching, whether it's career coaching or business coaching, is very important for youth development. And it also help young people to not only have the employment opportunities, but also to retain this employment opportunities and increase the income that is generated from this employment opportunities. Also, we are focusing only on providing decent job opportunities with good working environment and good salaries. Not any job opportunities. And for the entrepreneurs, we are matching our financial mechanisms to the micro entrepreneurs cash flow requirements, because this is a huge problem in Egypt. We have basic programs, basic microfinance programs that are providing loans that are not matching the startups and the early entrepreneur stages requirements, especially in the cash flow, which have a very negative effect on their liquidity, and it creates a lot of problems for the startups. And basically this impact process is start with developing the competencies, then providing the market access in terms of information and real job opportunities or employment opportunities, and then we are trying to enhance our impact and enhance our retention through the 12-month support, where we are providing mentoring programs and additional coaching programs. During this process, we are trying to measure the income increase in the family in order to see whether the employment opportunities that are provided to youth is eradicating poverty, or it's just like sustaining poverty, because this is very important in terms of poverty eradication programs. Not only providing job opportunities and employment opportunities, but make sure that this employment opportunities has a real impact on the family. Till now, we managed to have 35,000 training graduates, and we created 30,000 direct job opportunities, in addition to 28,000 job opportunities that is created by 8,000 micro and small enterprises that we helped in establishing. Also, we are trying to see our impact or the return on social investment that is done in Alashanik Baladi. So basically now we reached that every $1 that is invested in our programs is generated about 3.36 dollars in terms of the income that is generated from our employment opportunities. Also, we are trying to scale our impact, because as I said, the poverty problem is tough. The youth unemployment program is very hard for one organization to solve. So we are trying to have these replicas. We are trying to have these models that can be replicated by several non-governmental organizations. So we are working with other not-for-profit organizations and volunteers in order to replicate our model and provide the same services that we are providing to other beneficiaries that we can't reach. Till now, using this scaling model, we managed to outreach 10 provinces in Egypt, having 17 replicators that are adopting our economic development model. We engaged about 12,000 volunteers, and we reached 45 additional beneficiaries that is served by the same model that we are talking about. Until now, we managed to have 290,000 graduates out of poverty in terms of the family income increase. To focus more on the youth recruitment process, we have a simple process that starts with the outreach, then the registration with young people are coming and applying for our different programs, and then we have the selection process, and then the enrollment, which is matching the young individual applicants to our employment programs, and of course our capacity development and employment programs. So the outreach is basically a pre-designed campaigns that we have, based on the programs that we have, the job opportunities that we have, also the local market opportunities that we see for job seekers and also for the potential entrepreneurs. And we do our outreach and campaigns based on that, on the market demand and opportunities, in order to attract youth that are interested in this. Basically, we use a lot of channels like community networks and virtual networks, but here I need to say that it's not about the channels that you are using, but you need to see the channels efficiency. For example, for our entrepreneurship programs, we found that the online campaigns on social media is very helpful, but for attracting job seekers, it's not doing good. So we managed to have different partnerships with online employment platforms that is helping in attracting job seekers. Also for our target group, we found that the technical and vocational schools graduates and being in the network of these graduates is very important. While it's not helping us in our microfinance program, for example. For the microfinance program, most of the beneficiaries that are applying coming from the referrals from other beneficiaries that came and got our service, and they feel good about it, and they like saying about Alashanik Baladi in their networks, and we have these visits for our field branches. So it depends on the target group that you are trying to reach, but there are a lot of channels and a lot of ways that you can attract young individuals in terms of the outreach process. For the registration, we have a very in-depth registration process. We collect personal and general information, do socioeconomic assessments for all the family members. We collect information about the youth backgrounds, preferences, and also capabilities, because this is not only for registration, but it's also help us in the selection and the enrollment process, and also it's a base for our coaching sessions with the young individuals. And we are focusing on the target group, that young people that are unemployed, living in slum or poor areas with intermediate education and living in families that have monthly income below 300 US dollars, because this target group is or the unemployment in Egypt, it is like concentrated in this target group. If we combine this criteria, we will have a large number of unemployed individuals. So that's why we are focusing on this specific target group. After the registration, we do the selection. The selection is heavily depending on interviews. We are using behavioral and situational questionnaires. We are not interested in the technical or the vocational qualities or the technical and vocational skills, but we rather are more focused on the personal attributes. Because according to our experience, we found that it's very important to select individuals in your programs that are committed, have persistence, cooperation, and know the value of work. I think this is one of the key messages of this presentation, that you need to focus your selection process on the personal attributes, because vocational and technical skills can be learned. But it's very tough to have young individuals that are not committed, they are not persistent, and they are not valuing work, and you need to convince them through the coaching and mentoring process in order to develop themselves and get employment opportunity and so on. It's very tough, but for the vocational and technical skills, it can be gained easily. But basically, we identify two target groups. In the selection process, we have the job seekers and we have the potential entrepreneurs. Through our interviews, we see that job seekers tend to prefer job security, while entrepreneurs prefer to take calculated risks. Job seekers prefer to have suitable working hours, while potential entrepreneurs prefer to have higher income. They are very ambitious, and they need to have a long working hours, but in return of a higher impact. For the job seekers, they prefer good working environment, of course, but for the potential entrepreneurs, they prefer the challenging working environment. And finally, job seekers need to have clear working rules, responsibilities, and conditions, while entrepreneurs don't care about that, but actually they care more about work variety and work that include problem solving. Finally, for the enrollment process, it's basically matching the background, preferences, the capabilities of the young individuals with the current market opportunities that we have. It's the final process, and it's also heavily depending on research as well as interviews. For the matching process, the job seekers, we depend on the labor market assessment. The labor market assessment that we do with employers, we do with youth, we do with non-governmental organizations, and we do also with government officials to know what are the job opportunities, what are the required qualifications, and how the employers are selecting their new hires in order to help us in matching this with the young people capabilities and preferences. And for the potential entrepreneurs, we depend on the local market assessment, which is basically collecting information about the local community resources, the customer needs, and the market gaps and the opportunities that the entrepreneurs will tackle. This is for the matching process. And in the enrollment process and the placement process, it's heavily depending on interviews again. The job seekers, it depends on the employers' interviews. Employers are focusing more on communication skills, teamwork, and work ethics. This is more important for employers compared to the vocational and technical skills. And for the selection process of the potential entrepreneurs that we are going to support and finance, we focus on the attractiveness of the opportunity, their selling plans, their potential number of clients, and also the profitability and a healthy cash flow that they can generate out of this startup, because it's focusing on income generation, it's focusing on income growth in order to eradicate poverty among the family members. These are a sample of the funding agencies, the corporation and foundations that we work with. And that's all. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm ready for any questions.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thank you very much for a great presentation. I'm going to start with just one presentation from my side, and then we have a couple from participants as well. My question is this. It seems to me you've described very well the thorough approaches that your program takes to really ensuring that you're allocating youth participants in the right programs and in the right activities. And I think what you said that really stuck with me was that you need to determine the personal attributes of your youth, of your target youth, in order to determine what programs will be most relevant to them. And that's, in a way, not only a way of ensuring adequate targeting of programming, but also ensuring that they'll stay, ensuring retention as well. I'm curious about how you came to this classification between job seekers and entrepreneurs. What led to this distinction initially, and how did you come up with the methodology for separating these groups?
Actually, it's according to our experience. We found that if you are trying like to uh, go with all the programs that we have in the market, we have like trends. In 2008, we started the labor transition trend. We have a lot of donors and funding agencies that are more interested in youth unemployment, especially in wage employment programs. And we started to work on wage employment programs for all the youth that are applying to our programs. And we found that not all of the youth that are applying need actually a job in a company or a factory, but a lot of individuals are dreaming of like establishing their startup, starting their businesses. And the other side is true as well. When we started to have more and more entrepreneurship programs and microfinance programs, we had a lot of applicants that are applying, and we are trying to fit all the young individuals into our entrepreneurship programs or into our microfinance program. And again, not all the young individuals are ready or want to be entrepreneurs. A lot of young individuals basically need a job, need a stable job, and they prefer that, not to establish their startup. So we try to have like sort of lessons learned and to document this practices from different programs, and we reached this conclusion that we need, of course, like common personal attributes like the commitment, persistence, the cooperation and value of work, but also we need to distinguish between young individual that will be most likely successful in the entrepreneurship career or the entrepreneurship track, and other individuals that will be it will be more convenient for them and will be more successful for them to have like a stable job and to have like career progression plans and to become manager and to increase their income. You know, it's again no one size fits all program. We are dealing with human beings, so it's very complicated.
Absolutely. Thank you for those answers. I have a couple of quick questions about the program itself, and then a couple of questions about retention, and then we'll move on to Hillary's presentation. From Mark Bardini, he's wondering what the age range that you define as youth is in Egypt for your program. And from Caitlin Mitchell, she's wondering about the intensity of the vocational training component of the program, just because you seem to have scaled very quickly. And so she's interested in understanding what the intensity of that training component is. And just before you answer, I'll combine a little bit of David Morgan and Bonnie Politz's questions. They're really wondering, you know, what sort of jobs youth have been placed into, and how do they retain those careers for those jobs for generally, and if you have any data on retention.
Okay, the first question is for in Egypt we define youth as the same as the global youth age bracket. It's from 18 to 29 years old. But in Alashani Kabaladi, we are focusing on young individuals or young people because we found that most of individuals or applicants that are applying for Alashani Kabaladi are from the age from 21 to 35 years old. So we focused on this age bracket. But when we are saying youth, we are following the same global standards. But for our target group, it's basically from 21 to 35. This is 90% of our target group. The second question is the intensity of the vocational training. Actually, we are not focusing a lot on the vocational training because if you are providing employers with good candidates, like good candidates that are committed, that are have persistence, cooperation, and they value work and they need the job, actually you will have employers that are interested in providing their technical and vocational training. Also, at the end of the day, the technical and vocational training, it's best to be provided by the employers because they know what they need. And also, it will be like completed with an on-job training. So I think we need to have more and more partnerships between the non-governmental organizations and the employers, the private sectors, especially in terms of the vocational and technical training. And I think this is our best chance to not only to scale, but also to have more and more qualified candidates to the labor market through this partnership. The final question, I don't remember it, Daniel, I'm sorry.
The final question was just based on your experience and what data you've collected regarding your retention success. Have you shown that your approaches work well in retaining youth? What data is there for that? And are there any lessons to be applied elsewhere or even to national policy that could be taken from your data?
I will start with the final part of the question. Actually, in order to increase the retention rate of the capacity development programs of young individuals, we need to focus more on selection and we need to focus more on mentoring and coaching. I think this is the main pillars in terms of retaining youth and also in terms of developing their capacity. I think coaching and mentoring is more effective compared to training. This is my own personal opinion. And for the retention, we have most of our dropouts in the outreach, registration, and the selection process. But in terms of the enrollment process, we have like very small number of dropouts. We have like retention rate in the enrollment process about 85%. And we have a retention rate of about 65 or 70% after 12 months of providing the employment opportunity.
Great, thank you very much, Mohammed. We'll save any more questions for you for our Q&A later on, but for now I'll start uploading Hillary's presentation. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but I think that that's okay because we're getting some really thoughtful and engaging conversation. So we'll continue on. And Hillary, if you can unmute your microphone and also start your camera.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. We can see you as well.
Excellent. 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 Well, perfect. And Mohammed, thanks very much for your presentation because you set up the next presentation very, very well, as there are similar approaches in engaging youth and how we go about it. The conversation that I like to have focuses not just on engaging youth, retaining them, and targeting them around business development, but really specifically around agriculture. Oftentimes, as we're all familiar with, us as practitioners, researchers, economists, agronomists, all of us, we find agriculture to be the forefront of our generation's biggest challenge. How are we going to be feeding the future generations? How are we able to do this in a sustainable way? Oftentimes we think that, it's a world full of innovations and solutions and exciting and interesting. Why wouldn't everybody want this as their career? And why wouldn't you want to be involved with agriculture? Oftentimes when we go to the field, though, we don't find that. We find younger generations who appear to be uninterested and unmotivated in working in agriculture, and that they would rather spend their time in urban areas, on their cell phones, wearing suits or urban clothes, and spending time with their friends far away from the field. And, often as practitioners and researchers, we see a disconnect disconnect that's there. At Making Sense, we ask ourselves the question of, is there really a disconnect, or is it that we don't really understand youth and what they're looking for at this critical time in their life and how it relates to agriculture? So we've asked ourselves, what are youth priorities? What is it that they're really looking for? Under the USAID launch project in Liberia, we had a chance to ask young people what were their priorities. And we got a response of speed. We want speed and we want money. And they had a wonderful way of expressing this as a fast nickel is better than a slow dime. And this sense of urgency took priority in their lives. And when looking at agriculture, of the long term of a lot of crops, it didn't match up with what these young people were asking for. Additionally, we looked at what are the other things that they're needing and they're wanting. With that sense of urgency for speed, they wanted fast money and they needed money. Young people have all sorts of obligations to be contributing to their household, to be funding their own education, to be funding their siblings' education as well. And that being able to take time away from making money, however they're doing so, was really hard for them. And being asked to go away from making quick money into some longer term investments just didn't reside with them. We also heard from young people that, as similar to all other young people, they wanted to have fun. They wanted social interaction. They didn't want to be by themselves in an agricultural setting out on a farm. They wanted all of those social capital gains that they saw from a lot of other employment opportunities. So, as a result, we started to really think about this, of how do you get young people on that path towards agriculture? And at Making Sense, we believe that this is possible. You just have to design programs that truly respond to their needs. So looking back at the launch project and our work there, we started with really understanding who are the youth that we're being asked to engage with and understanding our target audience. Well, under this project, we were working with rural youth who are in and out of school. Sometimes the out of school or in school changed on a month-by-month basis. They were coming from highly vulnerable households and from populations. The education levels were very small. There was a lot of opportunistic livelihoods, very short livelihoods, not sustained, and very seasonably based. There was also, as with most young people, a sense of experimenting with risky behavior. It's something that we see everywhere with youth. And we saw it a little bit higher than normal, which isn't that shocking of seeing where their backgrounds and where they're coming from. They also had this high demand for engaging socially, being able to create social capital and express themselves to others and to have worth, and also that need for things to happen quickly. So we took this understanding that we had of youth and we started to build a program around it. The first thing that we did was really respond to that need of it needs to be relevant, it needs to be fun, and it needs to happen quickly. So what is a fun business that you can do and make money in one day? Host a football match. And so we brought all of our youth together. We did a quick, rapid 2-day business training, and as a result of it, they were required to have a business of a day, of a football match, where they had to work through concepts such as teamwork, communication, marketing, budgeting, negotiation, sales, and they had a chance to be the center of attention of a community by hosting this and being able to do so successfully. Here they were able to gain a lot of that social capital that they were looking for, have immediate results to the skills that they were building, and also have immediate cash that they were looking for as well. Next, we started to address these youth and transition them into more of an agribusiness lens. we started working with him on how to start to sell agribusiness products and to be an agribusiness dealer from the input side. Again, they had to go out and to work in the marketplace, but we did it a little bit differently, where we said, again, it's going to be a shorter term cycle of, fast cash, fast results. It's going to be a week-long business, and you're going to be able to do it in a group where you have that security and support of being able to learn, experiment, take some of those risks, a lot of those positive risks, put yourself on out there, but do so with the support of a group and in a controlled way. So these youth as small groups, they went out into the marketplace and they sold hose, machetes, local seeds, improved seeds, buckets and other supplies that were needed on the farm. Along the way, they were receiving coaching, long-term coaching that was set up with relationships of individuals in the community that they could relate to. These relationships were hugely impactful on young people, as they had a chance to be held accountable to an adult. They were able to have positive feedback. They were able to be called out on some of the areas where they were struggling, and really having that accountability on their actions to an adult in a very positive way. This provided the youth in these groups a lot of this additional safety that allowed them to take more positive risks that they weren't willing to take before, and to start to think in a more long-term pattern, past one day or one transaction of a business into 1 week and even beyond. The next step that we went through was setting youth up with small startup grants for their own agro-business. We provided 4 different grant packages for young people to be able to sell in their local community, in their own shop and in their own way. We worked closely with them on building those positive relationships with their customers, on getting that feedback that is needed, and of really being able to succeed in a longer-term income generation activity. All along the way, those coaches played a key role as they had built those relationships during the group business. Also, we found a lot of young people were back interacting with the other people that they had had in their group business, and this was a key element. Hopefully, my voice is a little bit better now. Okay. Another perspective of what this looked like, it really was a graduated approach. Understanding youth need to start out with a very quick, fast nickel and not even worry about that slow dime, and helping them build the skills that they needed over time to get to that slower dime, but responding as they grow and responding specifically to it. You've had a chance to earn money along the way. They were not holding back from other income generation activities and opportunities to be able to participate in skill building opportunities. They were able to see those immediate results. Whenever we brought people in to do skill building, the next thing was, okay, here's a business and here's an immediate application of these skills so that you're able to succeed. They had a chance to build the relationships that they needed along the way. They could build them amongst their peers, they could build them amongst their community, and they had a chance to build them with their coaches as well. And lastly, they had fun along the way. This is something that they continually came back to. It was an enjoyable process for them of being able to engage and not a negative state. Diving in specifically about how the youth were selected for these specific grants. Some of the great feedback that we got back was on the transparency of this selection process. We had a higher demand of young people who wanted the startup grants than we had available. And this ended up having a large impact on retention later on, as though young people might not be happy that they were not selected for a grant. They all understood why they weren't selected in that process, as they understood it, and it was open to them, and they did not feel that it was an arbitrary decision made by adults elsewhere. Also, the selection process was done on a merit base, and where we were able to demonstrate to youth these are the behaviors that we are looking for. We're looking for problem-solving skills. We're looking for demonstration and communication. We're looking forward to that commitment. So many of those things that Mohammed was just talking about. With this merit-based activity, it brought in that transparency, and anybody can do this. All you have to do is demonstrate the skills. Again, it's not arbitrary. It's not a a selection coming in from the capital or anything like that. And it helps with that transparency, and it helps motivate young people to be able to demonstrate those skills. We also went back and offered an additional round of grants for those who were not selected the first time through, and that gave the chance for youth to be able to improve their skills, to be able to come back and say, you know what, I wasn't really demonstrating that I would have the commitment that is necessary, but I can improve that, and I can make a change in my behavior, and I can get what I want as a result. This was very well received, and it was wonderful being able to make some of those keys. Another element of this was the actual tool itself and how it was being used by the implementation team. We did our best to streamline the tool and make it easy and accessible, something that seems very intuitive and simple, but often is not, is having the field team and the coaches being able to simply work through a tool and it be simple enough that they can use and that they can also explain back to more of that open engagement. One of the things that we wanted to highlight from this project is that of the launch project, we had one of the highest retention rates of youth, and we were also the only component that did not provide any additional allowances for transportation or food or anything else like that. And we found ourselves asking, how did this happen? We didn't provide anything additional, but yet we were able to retain such a high number of youth that everybody else had complained that we're not able to retain, that they didn't stick around through programming. Upon reflection back, we came to the conclusion that it had to do with several different things. First of all, the program we put together was relevant. It gave youth what they needed, and it responded back to what they were saying. It provided that catch. It gave them the fact of speed. They had that hands-on activity and that immediate application. It also allowed for flexibility. We understood that youth were in and out of school, that they had other livelihoods going on. And so we provided that opportunity for youth to be able to engage while demonstrating a commitment to the program and being able to show that skill building. In terms of adding value, this was something that we really targeted on skills that we were able to apply right away and to be able to see the impact of it. We didn't focus in on some of the longer term learning until much later on, because that wasn't going to be as tactile and applicable right away. So you continually felt that the trainings and the support was adding value to their own individual lives. The social capital that was built was very large. The young people were very much looking at how do I send those social signals to other peers of getting their attention, but also to adults. And we were able to create a social wealth through the engagement and the credibility of the program. Adults and parents, they were very proud to have their youth involved with this, and it created and elevated their status in the community by being involved, which really helped motivate them and keep them engaged in the process. Those relationships were key. They were really able to provide a positive relationship with an adult that, as we see oftentimes with youth, starting to spread into a lot of other places besides the business coaching. And less enjoyable. Our coaches who worked directly with the youth, they were really able to take on that concept of a safe space, of being able to create that, of that enjoyment, of that interaction, and keeping young people continually engaged, as it was a positive experience and not the negative experiences that they might have felt with some of the other education activities that they had engaged with. So what was the result? Well, we had over 200 youth agro-businesses that were created and sustained over a large period of time. These businesses were all located in rural areas, and they are responding to the needs of rural farmers and their communities. Some of these businesses are very mobile, with a wheelbarrow, and some of them are fairly fixed with a structure. Some of them even have some pretty empty shelves. The woman in this picture, she was very proud that her shelves were empty because she had just sold so many of her goods. She was in the process of getting her inventory back. These businesses changed and they morphed as young people's needs and desires were changing, and they were changing and responding to the demands of the customers as well. We were very open to that, starting to move into other products besides the agro products, because it's what was relevant for them, and knowing that they would keep the momentum going and stick with them and being able to bounce back from a lot of the different changes and shocks that they had experienced. One of the unintended but very positive outcomes that we ended up experiencing was that young people started to take the momentum of agriculture and go even further. We had a large number of youth that came back and said, we had this realization during Ebola that, how valuable agriculture is on the production side and being able to farm and what it is of thinking long term. We want to make that transition not just from agro input sellers, but into agro production itself, which was not an area we originally intended to use, but they made that transition themselves of being able to see even further and long term and past that really short term. So we worked with youth on creating some garden-sized farms. Again, that was a safe space to learn, to take positive risks, to be able to reach out and to really learn the production side and grow from there. So that exact same model of starting small, starting tangible, and allowing the farm sizes to grow with time. So in the end, we do believe that youth are really interested in agribusiness. And one of the big factors is how do we address and design programs to reach youth. And when we make them relevant, when we do targeting, then we can have that retention inside agriculture and have the next generation of local agro-businesses on input and sales and also with farmers. So with that, I will go ahead and open on and ask the question.
Great, Hillary. Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask one question that's come in from the audience. I'm just conscious of the time and that we still have Ashley's presentation. We can send you some of the other questions that have come in after the webinar. But the question that we have, and I'll combine a couple of other questions from Sarah Babb and also from Louis Alexander, wondering a little bit about how long the youth engagement is with coaches, how those coaches are selected, and then tagging in a little bit of Louis's question here as well. Are those coaches the ones who provide the youth agricultural market information and intelligence based on demand and quality of the agricultural market, or if not, who's doing that and how? So again, just if you could quickly comment on those, and then we can move on to Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely. So the engagement period was over about 9 to 12 months long. It depended a little bit of how long we were engaged with. They were not engaged with on a day-to-day or weekly basis, as it has some sprints of we're going to work on the business for a week and then take a bit of a break and then come back. And that was part of that flexibility in terms of where jobs were, where youth time were, but it was over a long period of time. The relationship that the young people had with their coaches, as mentioned, was fairly key. The coaches did come, we had several different coaches. One of them came up actually through the community. He was a youth leader himself, and we identified that he had the potential of being a lot more, and he started on the project as an intern and then grew his way up into one of our youth livelihood specialists. So he had a very special relationship with the young people from his county. We had a few other coaches that we brought in and who for the project resided in the county, and they were able to build up those longer term relationships. And we went through a very intensive selection process on experience with coaching and development of coaching skills as well. We ran a full coaching of coaches course for them. And in terms of where they got the market information, we did not have our coaches provide the agriculture market information because that was not their specialty. And we also wanted to emphasize that longer-term relationship of finding information out in the market and who was going to provide that information longer term. So we linked the youth up with the extension workers that were based in the community, had the information, and helping them build those relationships with other adults with the security and the support of those coaches. So looking for more of that longer-term impact and also where they're going to get the most reliable market.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and load Ashley's presentation, and we'll have, if we do have time, we'll ask you any more questions at the end, Hillary. But thank you very much for that great presentation. Ashley, if you can turn on your microphone and camera so we can hear you and see you.
Hello. Can you see me now?
Yes. Hi, Ashley. Please go ahead.
Hi. Great. Let's see. I need to move to the beginning of this presentation. Okay, great. So thanks for everyone else's presentations. I'm really excited to talk to you today about sourcing for youth employment programs as we do what Education for Employment. I'll provide a brief introduction about EFE for those of you who haven't necessarily heard of the organization. So our mission is to create opportunities for unemployed youth in the MENA by providing training in technical and professional topics and actually connecting people to jobs in many cases. So we have 3 training streams, one of which is job training and placement, in which we train in soft skills, sometimes technical skills as relevant, and then we connect people with jobs. We also train in job pathways, which are employability and job search skills, and we have entrepreneurship training to a lesser extent. So far, since we began work, we have placed 10,500 youth in jobs. 54% of our graduates have been young women. We work with over 2,000 employer partners since we began, and in all of our program streams, we have graduated 40,000 youth from our programs. In addition, I'd like to mention that we have an average graduation rate of 95%, so we've been successful in training retention. We also have an average job placement rate of 70% and a 3-month job retention rate of 75%. So we've had a significant amount of success so far, and we're continuing to work to increase those numbers in an ongoing way. So sourcing is a critical factor that affects all of these outcome measures and also output measures such as graduation rate. So I'd like to discuss a little bit what are some general principles of quality sourcing that we've learned about at EFE over our 10 years of existence. So number one is that customizing the approach based on the target group is critical. We work with a diverse group of youth. Some of them are university students, some of them are people who have left high school, those working vocational trades, and also those in rural versus urban areas. All of these different contexts and different target groups require different approaches. For university trainings, for example, we actually recruit through the universities. This is done through partnerships. The universities provide lists of youth who match our profile, and we actually contact them to recruit them to the training. In terms of high school leavers, this is a little bit more challenging because we're dealing with youth who are not currently enrolled in school. We don't have the partnership aspect that we do in, in a university. So we have to be more proactive in seeking out these youth. Partnerships do play a role, however, with community-based organizations that can connect us to these youth. So this has been particularly successful in Jordan. For example, we conduct garment center trainings there, or garment factory trainings, and we reach the women who we are actually recruiting for these trainings by partnering with community-based organizations. They help us bring the youth in. We also engage youth families in order to let them ask questions about the training, increase their understanding about who ESE is, and help kind of reduce any feeling of uncertainty around that. In terms of adjusting approaches as your organization scales, ESE has experience in this. We've had a particularly interesting experience in Morocco in which we were able to scale with a 20-fold increase over a period of 5 years thanks to catalytic support from the MasterCard Foundation. What we learned is that, we learned many things. One of the things that we learned is that it's very important to not, to check all of your assumptions. In this case, we had planned to source in partnership with some organizations in Morocco. And then as we started to implement, we realized that they didn't have access to as many youth as we expected, and the contact information for those youth were not necessarily up to date. So we had to switch gears after implementation started. We switched to more of a social media focused approach in that case, which was very successful. I'd also like to talk about gender balance. It's not always, we have a target to consistently reach 50% women in all of our trainings. And it's not a given that 50% of the people that apply to our trainings are women. So we have to take steps to ensure that we maintain that. It's not always possible. It can sometimes be challenging with vocational trainings in particular. Societal expectations in the Middle East and North Africa mean that women tend to gravitate towards office jobs as opposed to more vocational trades, which is the case in many countries. So we have to be mindful of all of these aspects when trying to maintain gender parity. So I'd like to take a moment to mention what we've tried in Jordan. As I mentioned, we engage families. The way that we do that is we actually bring them into sessions where they can ask any questions they want about the training. So that's the information session period. We can speak directly with the family. Sometimes that's the father, the mother, the brothers, those kinds of things. And then in addition, during the training, we actually provide tours of the factories in which women will work. So this is for training women for garment factories in areas of Jordan outside of the capital city. So that's been a particularly successful approach, which was designed from experience. Jordan ESE noticed when they first started to implement these trainings that families actually were coming without an explicit invitation because they wanted to know, who is this organization? What are they trying to have my daughter participate in? And so Jordan ESE began to be proactive about that and to proactively engage the families, and that's been very successful. I wanted to mention something about systems, having a systems lens when it comes to sourcing. Quality sourcing will have a quality impact on all aspects of your training. So, retention in the training itself, job placement afterwards, job retention. Likewise, the sourcing activities themselves can be impacted both positively or negatively depending on youth's experience in your training. So it's one affects the other, and it goes back and forth. So it's important to consider these factors when planning trainings and planning your sourcing strategies. So as I mentioned, I'll just kind of weave some of these ideas together before moving on. Social media is a promising approach. It is important to keep in mind that there are some youth that you won't be able to reach effectively via social media if they don't have access, for example, to consistent internet access. Universities are another promising approach, of course, if you're trying to recruit university students. Vocational schools have been promising for us. In Morocco, for example, we work with OFPPT centers. It's a French acronym that refers to these vocational training centers in Morocco. The centers recruit the youth, the centers themselves provide the vocational training, and then EFE provides the soft skills component of the training. So that's been particularly successful. I mentioned community-based organizations. And one thing I haven't mentioned is career fairs. In Morocco, these have been particularly successful. So you have to go where the youth are, and oftentimes you need to use more than one approach to engage them. What are some other promising approaches that EFE has used? In addition to everything else that I've already mentioned, market and sector assessments have been really promising in Morocco, and we're going to start implementing them in other countries. In Morocco, it's now the policy of the organization there, it's EFE Maroc, that when entering any new city, that they conduct a market assessment. These are typically conducted by consultants that involves a desk review of data about the area, and then interviews with employers, those kinds of things to understand what are we looking at here. Because working in Safi, for example, a port city in Morocco is different than working in Casablanca or working in Rabat. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Employer involvement in sourcing is also particularly helpful in many cases. We use this a lot in Tunisia. An example is Vistaprint, who we've had a long-standing partnership with there. Vistaprint goes into the areas outside of the capital city, Tunis, and recruits people. EFE Tunisie, our affiliate in Tunisia, makes sure that the youth actually match our beneficiary profile, and then we provide the training, and that's a requirement for the youth to actually get the jobs at Vistaprint. So it's an employer partnership that is really beneficial for the employer, the youth, and then EFE, of course, is happy to provide the training. I also wanted to mention the importance of having a central database of applicants. This is something that EFE, we are rolling out now, and we're quite excited about it. It's been something that we realized over time as we scaled that not having a data in a centralized area really creates a challenge in seeing patterns in what is happening in sourcing. We can't necessarily analyze across countries easily if it's not centralized. So we're very excited about this, and I wanted to emphasize that in terms of understanding quality sourcing, it's very important. Lastly, I wanted to make a quick mention of M&E activities. I know that we're about at time right now. Standardization of M&E activities is really critical, because if you're not measuring the same thing across the countries that you work in or across the sites that you work in, it's very challenging to determine what's working and what isn't working, or what's working in one location but maybe isn't appropriate for another location. So this is something that EFE has adopted since inception, since we began work in 2006. That being said, we are working on increased standardization in our measurement right now in the form of standardized application forms that are also complemented with more custom interviews for each context. And the interviews are aimed at measuring things like motivation and dedication to the training. Some indicators that are important to consider are input indicators like your acceptance rate, how many people are applying versus how many are actually qualified. Output indicators such as graduation rate, again, training retention is another way to think of this, and outcome indicators of the training itself, so job placement and job retention numbers. Lastly, I mentioned a centralized database. EFE is currently utilizing new surveys that are, as I mentioned, standardized and actually delivered straight from our central database. So this is really a game changer for any organization that wants to, again, centralize the data collection processes, be able to create really in-depth analytics for the organization and learning for different locations across the network. So we're very excited about this. And then lastly, I just mentioned that ongoing analysis and process improvement is critical for any organization working in really anything. But EFE has been excited to work on this. My colleague Jamie Bussey, who's a program manager here, has been leading a sourcing working group on this topic in order to really continue to collect learnings from the organization, find out what it is that one affiliate's doing that could be applied to another. So we've been really excited to be involved in this conversation, and it's something I think all organizations working in this field should consider. So with that, I will close. I'm sorry it was a bit rushed, but I don't want to keep you all.
Thank you, Ashley. It was a really great presentation. I really appreciate it. I wanted to take the time to take a couple questions from folks. So if you have any questions for Ashley, feel free to enter those in the Q&A pod. We'll also submit questions to our panelists that are recorded here that we didn't get to. I think we can keep going for a little bit. We do see that there's still 33 attendees to the webinar, and it's 4 minutes over time, so I think people are at least interested. But Ashley, maybe I can start by asking you a couple of quick questions, and I apologize for you having to rush through your presentation, but I'm very curious to hear a little bit more about your the way that EFE has taken these market assessments and sector assessments across borders. And so it seems to me like the programs that you've developed have scaled across countries in the Middle East and North Africa region. And I'm curious about the methodology of these market sector assessments that you mentioned are conducted really anytime you enter a new city or a new location. What do those look like, and what do those tell you about the new context that you're operating in?
Definitely, great question. So as I mentioned, this is something that we've started doing in Morocco. So we're currently in the process of actually scaling this across our countries of operation, but we've seen how helpful they are in Morocco. In terms of methodology, what happens is, it starts with a desk review of government data about the region. So one that we recently commissioned, again, these are typically done by consultants because of the technical knowledge required and the amount of time that they can take. We had one done in Safi in Morocco because we hadn't worked there before. The consultant began by looking at all the government data, then identified who are some key employers there. They actually conducted surveys of 56 employers there and did some face-to-face interviews as well. And the goal was to try to understand what is the typical profile of young people that these companies hire, what kind of contracts do they typically hire them under, is it fixed term, is it temporary, that kind of thing. And essentially trying to understand how is it that EFE what value add could we provide in that context. So it was they tend to be very, they can be in-depth or more in-depth or less in-depth depending on what your budget is, depending on how much time you have. But we found them to be very helpful. And we actually did conduct one in Algeria because we have one project going on there. So we look forward to...
Thank you very much. And I do have one question from Louis Alexander again. Wondering if you've worked with at-risk youth in any way that has required you to modify some of your strategies.
I mean, I guess it depends on how you determine or how you define at-risk youth. Certainly, the populations that we work with are often marginalized in one way or another. I would say that the best example for a more challenging population to engage is from Jordan. It has to do with our garment factory trainings in Jordan, because in this case, we are really recruiting women who, maybe a lot of times that they've really barely left the home by themselves without a family member. So it requires a very high-touch approach to ensure that people understand, the families understand who is EFE, what are we doing, why do we want to do this, where is it that their daughters will go during the day. In this case, one of the critical factors also is providing transportation to and from the factories. So this is provided through the employers themselves, but again, it's part of the package that EFE is offering to these young women. So, and this project has been done in partnership with UNDP in Jordan. So I would say that that's the best and most salient example is that particular example. We don't have that kind of engagement, that kind of high-touch engagement.
Great, Ashley. Thank you so much for your answer to those questions. And I think we will go ahead, since we are about 10 minutes over time, I think we are going to go ahead and wrap up. We didn't get to have a whole lot of conversation, I think, between moderators, but I think that there are several takeaways, at least that I've had from this webinar, that have been really helpful. I think ranging from Mohammed's presentation, that we really noticed that the importance of personal attributes and really catering programs according to individual youth and their desires and their interests, and also what sort of components of work and livelihood development they're most interested in. To also Hillary's presentation on understanding a little bit more about how to engage youth in a really effective way and in a way that attracts them to the sector that we're trying to build up. And also Ashley's really valuable lessons about adapting the program and adapting and catering programming and making sure that you take hold of the context of that you're working in across different countries. I think overall the message for me has been that we really need to consider youth as individuals, and really need to consider their environment that they're growing up in, and what their sort of personal desires are, what their motivations are before we design these programs and implement them. So it's really been helpful for me. I think I'd like to open up a quick poll just to see if others agree, if it's been helpful to them. If you can answer that, just so we can have a sense of your appreciation of the webinar, and also if you do have any suggestions for future webinars, please do let us know, and we can account for that in future webinars. I really want to thank our panelists, the four of them who presented from a variety of different places. In one case, I think a car parked somewhere in Egypt, in Mohammed's case, and it's really been amazing having your contributions. It's been a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you for all the participants who stayed a little late, and hopefully we found this beneficial for everyone. And on behalf of the Cross-Sectoral Skills for Youth COP, thank you for everybody who attended. And I have up on the slide now our email addresses for the COP champions. If you'd like to know more about the community of practice, if you'd like to be more involved, please feel free to shoot us an email, or also sign up to be a part of the Community of Practice group on the youthpower.org website. Thank you very much for your participation, and we're going to log off now.